This case involves a loving wife and mother who innocently went out to walk her dog in the afternoon sunshine. But what she found that day was not the calm and relaxing atmosphere she'd hoped for. That day she met a man who took everything from her, and when the dog returned home without her, her family knew something was terribly wrong. This is the case Vicky Thompson. This case begins in the summer of 1995. 30-year-old Vicky Thompson lived in a small village near Chipping in Norton with her loving husband Jonathan and their 2 young children, Matthew and Jenny, not forgetting their family dog Daisy. Daisy was a beautiful collie dog who had a great loving personality and couldn't have fitted in better with the family. Every day Vicky walked Daisy, mostly twice a day, once on a morning and once in the afternoon. It was not only for the dog. Vicky loved walking, and the lovely scenery around where they lived made it peaceful and relaxing.
Well, she was just a very loving mother. She was a very caring wife. She always found time for me and for the children. She put 100% of energy into everything that she did.
It was 4 p.m. on the 12th of August 1995. It was a normal day and Vicky was at home and Daisy was getting excited for her afternoon walk. So Vicky and Daisy then headed out for their second walk of the day. It was a beautiful summer's afternoon and the sun was shining as they headed out on their usual route in the pretty countryside on woodland not far from where they lived.
Jonathan, I'm just going to take Daisy for a walk.
Okay. I'll try and give your car a wash. It's filthy.
Bye.
Bye.
So you would expect me now to tell you about how Vicky arrived home with the dog and maybe how she prepared dinner and sat with the family, but that's not the case. That's not what happened in this story. So we're going to jump forward to 4:30 p.m, half an hour after they'd gone for the walk. Vicky's husband knew something was not quite right, as suddenly at 4:30, Daisy, the dog, arrived home on his own, but without Vicky. It was literally a case of waiting impatiently for her to eventually arrive home. Where could Vicky be? Her husband was quite concerned at this point, immediately thought something had happened to Vicky. Maybe she'd collapsed in the grass, and he couldn't sit still. He needed to go out and retrace her steps just to see if he could find her. So her husband Jonathan and 2 children went out to search for her. In the small community where they lived, the word quickly spread that Vicky was missing, as her husband Jonathan asked the neighbours and anybody he passed, dog walkers and alike, if they'd seen Vicky on their travels.
But as time wore on, I realised that something wasn't right. I needed to go out and look for her.
Haven't seen Vicky, have you? Dog's come home without her. Been up to the lane, there's no sign of her. Well, look, we'll go down and have another look.
Jonathan, haven't heard from you for...
Vicky's not with you, is she? She's missing. I thought she might drop by your place for tea on her way back or something.
Don't know, she definitely hasn't been around here. Look, I'm popping down the lane in a minute, so I'll have a look if you want. You found this on the lane?
Carolyn's sure it's Vicky's.
I became more and more frantic and was very upset about the fact that I couldn't find her and just needed her to come round the corner and see everything was all right. I tried to keep the horrible thoughts that could have happened to her at the back of my mind for the sake of the children.
Locals started forming search parties to search for Vicky. The tracks and footpaths where she walked were remote and often deserted, so it was unlikely that someone would just stumble upon her if she'd fallen in the long grass.
Back to the house, I half expected to see her there. I was quite surprised when she wasn't there and realised I needed to go straight back out. So I left a note on the table and took my phone with me.
At this time of year, the grass was long, the plants were high, so she may have been potentially lying in the grass, seriously injured, out of sight from someone. But after almost 3 hours of searching and calling her name with no sign of Vicky, her husband Jonathan called the police to report his wife missing. He explained to them how the dog had come back alone and how it was so unusual for this to happen. He told them his concerns, and they immediately came out to take more information and help search for her. Meanwhile, 2 people that were in the area had been told to keep their eye out. They noticed a couple of things that were suspicious.
What's that?
Oh, God. Look. Peter.
What's that?
Look. Look, don't go in there, look. I'll go and get that bloke.
I was terrified that the attacker might still be in the area.
As police scoured the area, at around 7:15, one of the searchers saw some kind of objects in the field, away from the pathway near the railway embankment, and on further investigation, they realised they'd found Vicky. She was still alive, but only just, thank God, but clearly very seriously injured by being hit with something that appeared to be rocks that lay surrounding her. Whoever had attacked Vicky had also attempted to hide the body with rocks and long grass. It hadn't seemed to make much of a really serious attempt to prevent Vicky's body from being spotted. It was thought that maybe they had dragged Vicky over a fence from the main path to this particular spot in an attempt to make it look as though she'd been hit by a train. Minutes later, Jonathan, her husband, arrived at the scene and barely able to comprehend what had happened. He was pleased that they'd found her, but visibly upset and traumatized by everything that was going on. It was immediately clear that there was a lot of blood around where Vicky lay in the grass, and due to the severity of her injuries, she was transported by air ambulance to the nearest hospital that could deal with her injuries. And from what they could initially see, she had lost a lot of blood and had serious facial and head injuries. She was unconscious. Detectives questioned her husband, but soon realised he was not involved. Despite the fact that Vicky had been found alive, she'd been taken to John Radcliffe Hospital in Headington, but Vicky had suffered severe skull fractures and a brain injury, and was not able to explain what had happened to her. The injuries that she suffered were deemed non-survivable, and her life support machine was switched off after 6 days. They spoke to neighbours, friends and locals who frequented the area. They wanted to know who had been hanging around in the woods that day. Had anyone seen anything suspicious or concerning? And as detectives built up a picture of what type of person would do something like this and their motives, they soon believed that the man they were looking for may have been spending time on the remote pathways, possibly touching himself up whilst watching any women that walked by. They wondered if Vicky may have seen him do this and maybe she'd confronted him, which was why it led to him attacking her. Now, on the 13th of September that year, they were certain they had found their man. He was arrested on suspicion of murder of Vicky Thompson. Mark Weston lived in the same area as Vicky and her family. He was described as an odd job man around the village, a bit of a loner who kept himself to himself and apparently didn't seem to have many friends. Mr. Weston was not at all impressed with being arrested, making it clear to them that he had nothing to do with this crime and telling officers that he was gardening all afternoon. His attitude during police interviews was one of mild aggression. He claimed that the police had a personal vendetta against him and he had only been arrested because it was an easy option for police. But he then changed his story to say that he was in the area where Vicky was attacked. He said he'd popped out on his bike to repay some money that he owed to villagers, but none of them were in, and so he wasn't able to substantiate the story, and no one had seen him to corroborate it. Now, it was said that on investigating and searching the area where Vicky's body was found, a plastic bag containing 2 bras, which were later found to be stained with Mr. Weston's semen, had been found not far from her body and near the railway embankment. When he was confronted about the bag of underwear stained with his DNA, he changed his story once again. But at trial in 1996, after they heard evidence against him, he was subsequently acquitted after the jury deliberated for 50 minutes. Later, the jury foreman wrote to Mr. Weston, feeling sorry for him and urging him to sue the police for wrongful arrest. The foreman told him, "I hope you are getting on well now, and I hope you go ahead and get that big compensation from the police, as they had no evidence of any sort whatsoever on you." For some strange reason, the judge at the original trial did not permit the jury to know about the plastic bag found that contained 2 bras and the fact that they were stained with Mr. Weston's semen. It had been found near the railway embankment on the day that Vicky's body was discovered. And police still believed that Vicky had come upon Mr. Weston touching himself up, and he attacked her before hauling her body over to the embankment in a hope that it might look like she'd been hit by a train. After the first trial had been reported in the news, women started to come forward to tell police about their encounters with Mr. Mark Weston. One woman said that he pushed strange notes through her letterbox. One of the notes pushed through the door said, "You make me sick. You even think I did the Vicky murder." Lucy, who had a young family, finally went to the police station after one very scary night when Mr. Weston pushed a string of increasingly strange notes through her door, then flashed a very powerful torch through the windows and kept on hammering on the door. By 2001, Mr. Weston was 26 and working as a barman in a local pub when he met 15-year-old Helen Russia, who was waitressing there at the time. Now, Helen was seeing someone else, but Mr. Weston really turned the charm on her. He also had a bit of cash, and he started buying her meals and buying her top-up vouchers for her mobile phone. Maybe less charming was the fact that he would text her up to 200 times a night. But he eventually got what he wanted and persuaded Helen to split up with her boyfriend, and they became a couple. But Helen quickly realised that the nice side of Mr. Weston was not the full side of him. That Mr. Weston had also attempted to strangle his girlfriend Helen Russia back in 2003. A very damning text message sent from Mr. Weston to his ex-girlfriend was also found in the new investigation. It read, "I killed her, and I would do the same to you." And police also believed that they now had blood evidence of Vicky's on the shoes that he was wearing that day. Now, following the original trial, Mr. Weston, who lived with his parents in the village, was convicted twice of harassing women, including the daughter of a police officer. The police were frustrated that they were unable to try Mr. Weston for murder. They now had evidence of blood on his shoes, the bag of bras with his semen on them, and the evidence of the women coming forward. But due to the double jeopardy law, which prevented defendants from being tried twice for the same crime, prevented him from standing trial for the second time. But this law changed in 2005, and Mr. Weston was rearrested and subsequently found guilty in 2010 of murder. After reopening the case and examining Mr. Weston's boots, which had been retained following the original trial, forensic scientists discovered 2 specks of Vicky Thompson's blood upon them, which had been deposited on the footwear when wet, but had been previously overlooked. His footwear placed him firmly at the scene, destroying his previous defence that he wasn't there and didn't know Vicky. Describing the difference in the analysis of the boots, Alison Levitt, the principal legal advisor to the Director of Public Prosecution, said, "It's not that techniques are different, but methods of examination have moved on. Looking for bloodstains of this kind is really difficult. It's a black boot with irregular surfaces, and looking for bloodstains involves a combination of the naked eye, a microscope where you can, and dabbing areas with a reactive agent, such as luminol. I think it's accepted by everybody. It's almost as much as an art as it is a science." Describing how the new blood evidence was revealed, Mr. Bryan, the head of Thames Valley Major Crime Review Team, said, We got it in 3 phone calls. The first one said, we found blood. A week or 2 later, it's female blood. And then after a week or 2, they said it's Vicky Thompson's blood. It was like a euphoria moment. Mr. Weston was jailed for life for murder, making him the first person to face a second murder trial following the removal of the double jeopardy law. He was ordered by the judge to serve a minimum term of 13 years in prison. Sentencing Mr. Weston to a minimum of 13 years following the trial at Reading Crown Court, Mr. Justice David Bean told him, "It has taken 15 years for justice to catch up with you, Mr. Weston, but it has done so at last today." Vicky's husband, Jonathan, said that after the hearing, Vicky's family have been through agony and have been exceptionally patient, waiting for this to happen, having to live with the fact that whoever did this to Vicky was not in jail. During that period, Mark Weston has been free to live his life. There was no justice in that, he said. He deserves to be punished for what he did, and now he will be. Vicky was the perfect wife and mother to our 2 children, and should have been able to see Matthew and Jenny turn into the fine young adults that they are today. At least now, they know the truth, and justice has finally been seen. At that time, the change in the law had been crucial into achieving justice for Vicky Thompson and her family.